Okay, so we're gonna.
Crack open that beer, Fred.
If you could see this, it says Clarbrun sparkling water.
Yeah, Fred, that's what I was telling too.
Okay, so we're gonna.
It's short for Miller High Life.
Okay. So we are live on YouTube, I believe. Let me double check. Yes.
You want to scroll down so
Yeah.
the statement can be read.
Let me see if I can. Oh, does this have to be here or maybe it does?
The opening statement's up there too. If you want to read it off of there.
Yep, we're ready.
I'd like to call the Board of Education meeting to order. Let's all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call.
Do you want to read that opening statement? It's up there. To let people know.
Today is Thursday, November 5th, 2020. We are in the Brecksville Broadview Heights Education Center. This is a work session of the Board of Education held in public for the purpose of conducting the school district's business and is not to be considered a public community meeting. There will be no public participation. Prior to the work session, the board will meet in executive session to prepare for conducting and reviewing negotiations or bargaining sessions with employees. This meeting will be live streamed via YouTube and will also be recorded for later viewing. And then we have the links in our agenda. Can I have item 2? Can I have a motion to go into
You want to
executive?
do, sorry. You
Roll
want to do
call.
roll call?
Roll
because
call,
we-
sorry.
Mr. Dosen,
Yes,
Mrs. Kramer,
Yeah.
Mr. Peterson,
you're on mute.
Yes,
Mrs. Wigman,
Yes.
Mrs. Mack.
Yes. Item 2, executive session. We're gonna enter into executive session. I'm going to ask for a motion to enter into executive session per Ohio Revised Code 121.22, item G, for the purpose of preparing for, conducting, or reviewing negotiations or bargaining sessions with public employees concerning their compensation or other terms and conditions of their employment. I have a motion.
So moved.
second,
Okay, roll call.
Mr. Dosen,
Yes.
Mrs. Kramer,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson,
yes.
Mrs. Wigman,
Yes.
Mrs. Mack.
Yes. We will now be in executive session and resume at 6:30 for our work session. Thank you. Let me know when we're live, Craig.
We are live.
Hey. Do you want to invite those people in? Or? Okay. Okay. We have item 3, work session. We're reconvening after executive session, and we're going to be looking at our educational model. The way that the 3 things we need to come up with as a board is, number 1, we need to look at what educational model should be used up through Thanksgiving break. 2, what educational model should be used after the Thanksgiving break. And 3, should the educational model continue to be tied to the county heat map? Mr. Dosen, would you like to give the recap?
Yeah, I think just to kind of outline where we've come from, back on September 30th, the board met and we gave direction to switch to a 5-day in-person educational model to start on October 26th. And that was under the heat map color codes of yellow, orange, or red. We did not give direction to change the plan for purple. So the old plan had purple, had us switching to fully remote. So that was still in our plan. Back on October 22nd, the county Cuyahoga County was placed on a purple watch, meaning we had hit 6 of the 7 indicators. And if we stayed in that zone for a second week, we would be purple. So given that that was October 22nd and the following Monday, we were ready to start 5-day in-person model. There was great concern that we could, a few days later on the next Thursday, be tagged as purple and have to switch to fully remote. So the suggestion was that we hit pause and pause on the 5-day switch and just remain in hybrid. And that's what happened. On October 29th, which was a few days ago, a week ago, sorry. Last Thursday, the county actually switched back to red, and we still remained in hybrid until the board could meet to figure out what we wanted to do next. So now we're at November 5th, and the board is meeting to provide direction. And as Kathleen mentioned, we're trying to figure out what is the plan to go moving forward from now through Thanksgiving, after Thanksgiving, and also do we want to remain tied to the heat map, which has caused a lot of to and fro, back and forth with our plan.
Okay. So I'd like to start with our educational expert, Ms. Magyar, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on those 3 points and what kind of direction you would like to give to the board as your recommendation.
So I just want to talk a little bit just about the last 24 hours, unfortunately. I think from the beginning of the school year, our school district has done a fabulous job of mitigating this virus. It has not been in our school district. The cases that we had early on have been brought from outside. We were able to determine that. And we've been able to, maintain our buildings with very low spread within our buildings. In the last week, we've seen an uptick in our cases locally. There's been a lot of discussion about looking at local data. So our local data, unfortunately, in the last week has taken a little bit of a turn. We've had several staff members get diagnosed with positive cases, ones that have been in our building, which then in turn has caused us to have to quarantine other staff members. And in addition, put a building on remote as of last night because as you know, when somebody gets tested positive, if it's at 7, 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night, we can't actually process the contact tracing till the next day. And so there's a little bit of a lag there. So just to be safe, we put the building on remote learning because of that. And then this morning at 6 a.m., we received another phone call that we had another positive case at our preschool. That staff member was very diligent and knew exactly the people that they were in contact with, but we had to wait till the Board of Health opened up at 8:30 to actually process that contact tracing. It was determined that there was enough of kids at the building that were going to need to be quarantined, and then enough of staff members who were also exposed that we have now put the preschool on remote learning through Thanksgiving break. The reason we did that, our preschool, when the quarantine order was over for most of those kids, it was going to go through to November 18th. They don't have school on Wednesday. They would come for 2 days and then be out again for Thanksgiving. So it was just, we put them out on remote learning until Thanksgiving for that reason. In addition, we had a teacher at the middle school who tested positive. Again, a need to quarantine 2 staff members and 16 students. And then at the end of the day today, I got a call from Mr. Ost where we have a positive student, 2 probable positive students that we're waiting on test results for. And from that 1 student, another 20 students that we had to put in quarantine at that time. So, my thinking on this has changed just slightly because of looking at our local data and what's happening in our building. I think one of the concerns that we have as an administrative team is that, we can put kids in quarantine. What is that magic number? What is that threshold that you have so many kids in quarantine? Does it make sense to switch to remote learning because of what is happening within your building? The other issue that we found out last night when we got the call from the elementary building, I immediately called our HR director and said, is there any way we can find 9 subs for tomorrow? So the other problem with when you quarantine people, especially staff members, there may not be the ability to staff that building the next day to keep it open. So these are things that we've been looking at, that we are considering. And so the thought of it, you bring back kids 5 days a week, does that number at the high school of kids that we have to quarantine jump from 20 to 100 now because there's that many more kids in the building, there's that more level of exposure. And just as a reminder, we go by the County Board of Health's recommendation for quarantining. So it's not like we're saying to these kids, you must quarantine. This is what the County Board of Health is saying. These people have to quarantine based on the scenario, based on the scenarios that we have. And so, it's one of those never ending questions that I'm struggling with, because I know that our elementary kids need specifically to get back in front of their teachers 5 days. We know that they're struggling. We hear from parents all the time that they are struggling. And so how do we balance bringing kids back 5 days and looking at our local data that has changed even in the last 24 hours than it looked even last week? And so, my thought is yes, we have to get kids back in the building. I don't know if doing it tomorrow is the right answer. We can't physically do it tomorrow. When we pressed pause back on October 22nd, we did not implement any of the changes, meaning we contacted parents, because some of those kids who had to switch teachers, some of those kids that would be, switching back to different buildings, we surveyed all the parents. And since that time, since we pressed pause, we never actually physically made those changes. So some of our virtual teachers were needing to go back in the classrooms. Those things did not happen. And so I think my administrators are here, and I thank you all for coming. We had an administrative meeting yesterday. They knew that the board, we were having this meeting tonight, and we asked for feedback from our administrators. And I don't think that there's an elementary principal in this room that wouldn't agree that we want to see our kids back 5 days. I don't know if it's something that we can't do it next week. We need some time to be able to then restart all of those plans that we had in place. They're all there, but there's food that needs to be ordered, because now you're feeding that many more kids. There is possibility that there could be some impact on transportation, because now how many kids are going to be on a bus? And so we have to analyze some of those things before we can just jump right back in and do that. If you remember, we pulled some staffing recommendations off the last board agenda because we were pressing pause. So there's people that we still have to hire if we're going to make this change back to 5 days. And so it isn't something that we can do in a week. And so if I look at the timing before Thanksgiving, I would say, if we need next week to organize it, we're back in the same situation where we were on October 22nd, where we would bring kids back for 5 days and then they'd be out again for Thanksgiving. And so, it would be my recommendation that if we're thinking about bringing kids back 5 days, that it wouldn't be until November 30th at the earliest, so that we can time to plan. We have time to get this organized, talk to parents again, because even after we surveyed parents, there were some parents that changed their mind afterwards. So we have to go back and readjust and call some of those parents that, changed their mind about the model to see if that is still a model that they want to be committed to, because it was after the deadline. In terms of middle school and high school, when we talk about going back 5 days, we talked a lot with our building principals on that yesterday. Their preference would be to stay in the hybrid. There's a feeling that the hybrid model is working at the middle school and high school. And the kids are still able to participate in their extracurricular activities. So they're getting some of that social emotional support that we talk about that they need at those levels. And so if that is something that the board would like to do to keep those in hybrid and think about bringing the elementary schools back, I could, support that model as well. But I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I'm not concerned about what has happened in the last 24 hours. And I'm more concerned that if we have more staff that test positive, that we're not going to be able to staff a building. And so that we're going to have to go to remote. So, our options would be going from being fully in to remote, and that could toggle back and forth based on the spread amongst our staff.
So what is your opinion about having our plans tied to the heat map?
So I don't think so we're 4 months smarter now about this virus than we were when this started. And so when this came out and the county came out with a heat map, all of the superintendents in the area kind of jumped on the heat map, because we needed a reason to say, this is why school is going to be open, or this is why school is going to be closed. We are not medical experts by any stretch of the imagination. And so it was our way to say to our families, to say to our community, okay, we're going to watch the county data. We're going to watch the county data. And we're going to tie whether or not we're open to that heat map. What we've learned 4 months later is that some of those agreements that were made early on back in June or July, schools are not in session because of an agreement that they have, and not because they can't be because of their local data. And so, you have a city my good friend, who's the superintendent in Lakewood, signed an agreement back in June when this first came out for the reasons we all wanted to talk about the heat map and tie ourselves to that. Poor kids in Lakewood, they haven't stepped foot in their buildings since, March of last year because of that agreement that was made. So, I think about that, and I think about, us not being able to look at our local data and make those decisions locally. And I really don't feel that we should tie ourselves to that heat map so that we can continue to look at what's going on within Brecksville, Broadview Heights, part of North Royalton, and look at that data to determine, whether or not our kids should be in school and or determine whether or not when to go remote and when not to.
I mean, interestingly enough, as far as the heat map is concerned, 4 weeks ago, the county met 5 indicators. And then 3 weeks ago, it went to 6 and put us on the purple watch. And then that started a whole chain of events here. We're having this meeting right now because of one more indicator triggered that we decided to hit pause and stay in hybrid, which then caused us to then have to pause longer, would then bring the whole board back. And, had we not been tied to the heat map, just kind of looking back in hindsight, we'd be in our second week of 5-person, all day right now. Mm-hmm. And so, that's one of the parents talking about, wanting consistency and whatnot. And, at some level, the virus is in control, and it always will be until we're on the other side of it. But had we not been tied to the heat map, we'd be 5 days, week 2, and we wouldn't even be here. We wouldn't even be at this meeting. And some of the stuff that we've gone through with these swings has been, we went from orange to yellow, orange to red, then on the verge of purple, then back to red. And today it was out, we got 3 indicators. So we went from 6 down to 3. So that's part of the challenge with us being tied to the heat map, is we're exposed to these wild swings 1 week to the next based on how many indicators triggered versus what's happening in our buildings, which you gave a recap of. Now we're starting to see COVID's finding us more in our buildings.
Okay, well, Mr. Dozen, since you were talking, do you want to say your thoughts on this?
Well, I guess let me start. I want to ask Joelle another question, because you mentioned about talking to our principals and our administrative team, and that they're finding that the hybrid model at middle school and high school, that is it works better than it does at the elementaries, which most people probably wouldn't be surprised to hear that. But back in October, when we talked about going to 5-day, the recommendation was we go back 5-day K through 12. So I guess the question I have is that, was staff engaged back then? And, what was the outcome of that engagement? If back then the recommendation that you brought to the board was we should go back K through 12, 5-day. Because now it sounds like, that some of that may have changed.
Absolutely, because I think our local data changed. I mean, back when we were talking about going back 5 days, we are doing a good job in our buildings. We're mitigating the virus. We're still not having spread in the virus. I think that the concern is, from now, our data looks different than it did back when we made the decision on September 30th to go back 5 days. It looks a lot different now than it did then. And so I think, it's caused all of us, the reason we took a pause to say, let's bring back everyone. The reason we did that is because our data started to look different. And, this last 24 hours, it's looked really different. We had the conversation yesterday with our administrators, and, certainly it's not necessarily about, bringing the kids back. There's not a principal in this room that doesn't want to have all their kids back every day. There's not an administrator in this room that doesn't want these kids back 5 days. Absolutely. But as we're seeing cases rise in our local data, I think it's caused us all to say, all right, do we do this now? Or, as we've talked, in our original plan, the one that we talked about looking at the heat map, yellow and orange, we were going to be in person 5 days. So yes, we would have been in 2 weeks, second week of 5-day now. But the original plan, we would have had 7 weeks of in person, and now only would we be in hybrid. So I think you're right, tying it to the heat map for that exact reason, because we don't have the ability then to look at local data. And I think, when we talked to the principals yesterday, certainly, we're balancing, yes, we want our kids back 5 days. If we're seeing this surge locally right now in these buildings, and, elementary, we haven't had a case in elementary. We haven't had the kids have one case, but we've had cases at the middle school. We've had with students, and we've had cases at the high school. And since it seems like, and the feeling of the principals are that the hybrid is working, and it's working because kids are getting 5 days instruction. They're in both models, at the high school and at the middle school, they're getting 5 days of instruction. So even if the kids are not in person, they're running a concurrent model at the high school, and they're running the same type of program at the middle school, where the kids who are not sitting in the classroom are live streaming that same lesson. So they're getting 5 days of instruction every single week. And so that is why there's feelings that that's a more successful model at that age. Those kids also have developed independent learning skills, and they're able to learn independently more so than kids at the elementary schools. So I think the conversation has changed from, yes, back on September 30th, we were all in. Let's get all of our kids back 5 days a week as soon as we possibly can. And as our local data started changing, it makes us pause and say, hey, do we look at changing the whole school back 5 days a week? We still know that we need to get our elementary kids back just because of skill building. But do we need to rush that right now? The goal has always been to get kids back 5 days, and it will happen. We will get kids back 5 days. The question is it the most appropriate time to do it right now, as we're seeing this surge with cases within our local buildings?
So let me follow up on another question then, and this is more specifically for the middle school and the high school. So when students are out because, let's say, of quarantine, can you, and I know Mr. Barton gave us a presentation last time, but in that particular case, what does that look like? Are they able to dial into the live stream of the class so they can kind of keep up as best they can?
Yes.
Okay. So, because where I'm at, so let me say where I'm at is I think we absolutely need to decouple from the heat map as soon as possible. And we need to get kids back in school 5 days a week as soon as possible. And could part of that switch to go back 5 day, could that come with the guidelines that say, hey, if circumstances on the ground have changed and some parents are not comfortable with their kid going to school on a given day, say, you know what, stay home today as if you're like quarantined, and then just follow live stream. Is that part of our plan, or can that be part of our plan if we go back 5 day to allow parents to say, hey, whatever, there's a lot of spread going around and I'd feel better if my kids stayed at home?
Steve, Todd, yes? That's my understanding of the concurrent model.
I believe that we can certainly do that. I think we do that now. We quarantined several kids this week. The one nice thing about the hybrid is we probably would have quarantined at least twice as many kids if they would have all been back, because every other seat is not quite 6 feet. So if everybody would have been back, we would have probably quarantined twice as many, at least at the middle school. So I think that has helped us at the middle school. And I'm going to guess it's probably the same with the high school, but we can certainly, anybody on quarantine now has the ability to Zoom in every day to all their classes.
Okay. Because I have a niece at a local school, private school, and that they operate under that says if at any point in time on a given day you don't feel safe, stay home and then just plug into the live stream. So same thing.
There's just been so many, because there's a delay with testing, and there's, in some areas there's testing shortages. So just recently we've had a number of situations where students have self-isolated. And I think because we run a concurrent model, and because our students or our teachers and students have done a good hybrid, students have been able to kind of bounce in and out of that as needed, or while they're waiting for a test result, or until they get better.
Okay, good. I mean that's good to hear. I mean, my position again is that I would like to see us go back to 5 day as soon as practical for a K through 12. And if we can't pull it off next week, as soon as we can, that would be my hope. Even after Thanksgiving, we moved to 5 day, and there would be a window if the majority of the board decided to go there. We would give another opportunity for parents, because we are Because we're decoupling from the heat map, we would be making adjustment to our plan. Our current plan says if the county goes purple, we're fully remote. We're decoupling, we're not tied to the heat map, so it doesn't matter if the county ties purple, if that's where the board lands. So that would be a change in our plan. So, you know, I would want to offer parents another option or a second chance to say, are you still comfortable? You signed up for the 5-day. We did make a change to this so that if we go purple, we're still going to school, but also communicate that on any given day, if it's purple and a parent's like, I don't want my kid going to school, or if some spread happened and they're uncomfortable.
And I think that method for 100% works at the middle school and high school that are already running that model.
Right.
But we have got our littlest learners who, and I'm in the thick of it, so we've got our littlest learners who I can totally attest to cannot do self-directed learning. So even if we have families that aren't comfortable going into school that day for whatever reason, I don't know that plan has been identified in terms of students being able to like drop in to an online learning, because as far as I understand, at the elementary level, it is in no way, shape, or form set up to do any version of streaming during the regular school day. Yeah.
Dropping in is at 20 minutes, is at an hour. It gets challenging at the elementary level. So we look at it, like I said last week, more of there will be lessons and assignments posted in Google Classroom with the opportunity for the teacher to then follow up with feedback and checks for understanding something. But in no way would it be plumbed to a schedule.
Yeah.
It's just not going to be able to, that's just not possible developmentally for semester.
Yeah.
So I don't think anybody in this room has actually taught this hybrid model. I don't know, maybe you've substituted, but I have actually taught it. And I will tell you, it is very difficult at a middle school and high school level. And in fact, we spend most of our time at a middle school level with the distractions that are going on with the kids who are remote because we're teaching at the same time. I can tell you, I team teach, and when there's 2 teachers in there, it's doable. But when there's not, you have the kids who are up there on your screen and the kids in the audience watching those kids up on the screen. So you got to take them away. They can't see half of the material that you're doing. And our lessons as a teacher are taking us 2 hours to prepare. So you can have these interactive things for both groups so they both can be included. I have gotten over 10 letters from teachers that don't feel comfortable speaking up to administrators saying, this is not working. So I want to be the voice of education. I've done this since August. I am on the ground. I am telling you from an educational standpoint, I'm sorry, I will not agree that it works at a middle school. I think at a high school level, I think it's okay at best. I think there's a lot of cheating going on. I think there's a lot of other things going on. I know we can probably recognize that. I don't think there's a lot of limitations at a high school level that I see these unbelievable educators try and work through that you just can't. The platform doesn't allow for that. And I've seen, as I spoke in the last meeting, the children who are going Thursday, Friday are not getting the same education as Monday, Tuesday. Okay, and it's how we develop lessons as educators. We start with the new skill, and as we get to Thursday, Friday, we're generally, recapping, refreshing, and then we're assessing. It's just how we run our lesson plans. So I would be with Mr. Dozen. I want us to get back 5 days. I want everybody to get back 5 days. I do recognize that the limitations are far greater for our younger ones. It's not developmentally appropriate, but I want to speak to our middle school and high school as well. Although they are doing okay, some of them, I can tell you that we can do better. This is our business. And I really want to give parents an opportunity to do what's best for their family, but I want to give the choice back to parents, and I want to give the choice back to teachers that, you know, we are going to give a 5-day model, and, you know, that's what's educationally best at the level that Brecksville, Broadview Heights, and our parents expect us to do. I'm happy to hear another, you know, I'm happy to hear that we would remove ourselves from that heat map. It has been something like an albatross around our neck, and I would like to see us look at ourselves locally, although I understand we're not in a bubble. And a lot of our instances that have happened in our district have been because people have brought it in from outside. We are running a wonderfully safe environment. I live that on the ground, and I can tell you, as you know, Governor DeWine has said, I mean, our schools are really a good, safe place for kids. I can tell our staff is being diligent. I know that, you know, we are being ridiculously diligent in my day job, and it can't get any better than what we've done. I mean, when people are bringing stuff in, we're going to live with this for a long time. And I just keep seeing the gaps get larger and larger. And I really, I see Revere 5 days. I see Independence 5 days. They are smaller districts than us. I recognize that. However, our children those gaps are getting larger, and our children are getting farther and farther behind. And so, you know, I respect the wishes of the board, but I do want to make it clear that I think all of our children deserve a 5-day education. And I really, what our educators have been going through, the level of rigor that has been put on them is just it's unbelievable. And I don't know, I respect administration, but they have their own challenges in their job. And I just think that if you actually started doing this day to day, I mean, there's almost every day I just want to lay my head down and cry because it's overwhelming. So I just want to speak to that. I think that's my point.
I've been pretty consistent through this whole thing, and I'm going to continue to be consistent. I think because our caseload in our schools is going up, not that it happens in our schools, but it's brought in. Our going up. Caseloads in Cuyahoga County is going up. Our caseloads in the state, everywhere you look, it's getting worse instead of better. And yes, we had only 3 of the quote unquote heat map factors this week, but one of those is caseload. And we went from 74 cases in mid-September to 318 cases yesterday. Statewide, we went from 2,513, which was a record 2 weeks ago, to a caseload of 44,000, 3 times this week. It's getting worse, it's not getting better. And I believe that our schools are doing a great job. Our teachers are doing a fantastic job. Our administrators are doing a fantastic job. Everywhere I look, I think our job educating our kids under the conditions that they have to live with. And I think a lot of the reason that we're not spreading is because we are on the hybrid system. Our kids are better separated on buses, they're better separated in rooms, they're better separated throughout our district. And with the way things are going right now, and I hope this week was a perfect storm and that we drop in the next week and 2 to 3 weeks off of a high of this week. But I can't see going back full time this year. So my position is that we stay in hybrid to Thanksgiving and we continue in hybrid until Christmas. And if God forbid something changes to make it worse, then I'd probably want to talk about going remote.
Fred, the third question, how do you feel about the educational model being tied to the county heat map?
I don't believe that that's necessary. I think we have to base our decision on what's going on in our district, not the county-wide.
Thank
So
you.
I'd be more than, I'm fully in agreement with decoupling it from the heat map.
Mrs. Kramer, your thoughts?
My thoughts are, I also do not want to be tied to the county heat map. And I am going to, we're getting input from educational experts at this point. There are numerous of you guys in the room. Apparently, even the experts don't all have the exact same opinion. But I would love for the K-5 kids to go back to the buildings 5 days a week as soon as possible. I'm very torn about the older kids going back in 5 days a week as soon as possible. I guess I'm just curious from the high school and the middle school principals, can you guys add anything to what Joelle had to say? Or, I mean, did she pretty much voice exactly what you guys had said to her?
I mean, just to start, and from the beginning of our planning for this school year, I mean, I've been a huge proponent for coming back 5 days. I just think as we look at the timing, as we're approaching Thanksgiving, we're approaching winter break, 3 weeks after Thanksgiving. I just wonder how prudent it is, to jump into that, before those 2 holidays, which, traditionally bring a lot of people together. We want our kids back at the high school, but at the same time, as we're experiencing these increases, whether it's in the county, the state, most importantly, locally, I just wonder if this is the best time to make that jump. We were very excited, but at the same time, to speak from the feedback that we received as we were preparing for 5 days, we experienced it. There are some strong feelings amongst our students and our families. There was a petition circulating about staying in the hybrid. And I'm sure, you have to think of, all the reasons why a high schooler might sign that petition on a year of COVID or on any other year. But that being said, that there still is a lot of concern out there about safety, and we're trying to do our best to mitigate that concern with all the precautions that we're taking. But I don't know. I mean, I would love to get to 5 days as soon as possible, but I just think with the timing of the calendar, I don't know if this is the best time to do it. I'm also very glad to be in these shoes and not your shoes. But that being said, it's a tough situation, but, with 2 holidays that bring a lot of people together, I'm concerned that, then we bring everybody back. Mr. Rings talked a little bit about the challenges, we have a lot of things in place, students wiping down their desks, desk shields, you name it, but, when you call the county and you have a case or a probable case, they tell us you can be wearing a face shield, a mask, you could have a desk shield. It doesn't matter if you're within that 6 feet, unless you have that N95 mask on, you're going to be quarantined. And so I just would hate for us to be in a situation where, we could have made it to winter break in a hybrid, and then somehow got shut down because after we came back from Thanksgiving, we had, an outbreak of cases that increased our quarantine.
No, I agree. I wonder, as Josh said, Thanksgiving, Christmas, we look back at last week, what was last week? Well, that was Halloween. Now we're seeing a lot of rise. There were a lot of people out there, a lot of Halloween parties. We heard a lot of our kids being at these Halloween parties. Now we have several more cases in our buildings. So I'm wondering if any of that's tied to those parties that they had, and then what happens when we go to Thanksgiving and then we go into the Christmas break as well, because that's obviously the more natural time to even bring extended family together and friends. So I worry about that as well. And we're just so tight at the middle school, the way we're built right now, and it's just going to double the numbers every time we get a case. We're going to double the numbers of kids in staff that we potentially quarantining.
So I have a question. So what's the difference between the middle school and high school and the elementary? Because we did shut a building down and we have more kids in those buildings. So I guess, and those are larger buildings, the middle school and the high school. So what's the difference, as far as like
But
concern?
as far as I know, I'm misspeaking, but I believe the one in elementary today was not a student that had it. We haven't had a student in any of the elementaries that had it. That was a staff member at the high school and middle school. We've had several students who have tested
Sure.
positive. So it's the kids that are starting to bring it into the schools. This was just staff, I guess. But then again, we're pretty tight in our numbers
Sure.
with grade 5 to grade in that building. So
But the kids the kids could bring it into the elementary as well. So, okay.
we haven't seen that yet.
Well, we haven't seen that yet. Well, and I'm just thinking like class switch, maybe class switching, maybe that's your,
Yeah, that's
concern. And the elementary, they don't switch classes. Do the practical people, they stay in their class all day? Is that correct, Mr. Hartland? Okay, so the difference would be logistically is that at our elementary, we'll have everybody, let's say we had everybody back 5 days, those kids are staying in their classroom. So it's contained in a classroom, whereas the high school and middle school, those kids are switching. So they're contaminating more people. So logistically, what you're saying is there's a difference between the elementary and the high school and middle school. Is that right? Okay.
And I think with regard to spread too, I don't think you're ever going to see a spread between children at the elementary level as you would at a middle school or high school. There's been a lot of data in the news. There's been a lot of factual information out there that says in the younger children, it's not spreading amongst the children. You're going to see buildings closed down because of the staff, because of spread within staff. This happened on a day yesterday where there were no children in the building.
It was a remote
whatsoever.
day,
It was
yeah.
just a collaborative day where 1/4 of my staff was there.
Hmm.
And even amongst that 1/4 of the staff, it shut down the building.
Mhm.
So I don't foresee the children, a spread amongst the children at the elementary level shutting down the buildings. It'll be a spread amongst the staff. And going back to a comment that Mr. Dosa made earlier, where we could have been in this 5 days a week for several weeks. I would contend that a week like today, or I'm sorry, a week like we experienced this week in a 5-day setting could have very well shut down the school district. We shut down 2 buildings in the last 24 hours out of 6 with no students on hand in the instances. So to bring everyone back, we're gonna have classrooms of 25 or more at the elementary level. Spacing of 3 feet or less. We had engineers come in at the beginning of the year to take a look at our room sizes, measure our square footage, and make the recommendation that we shouldn't have more than 12 kids in based on the 6-foot rule. And when you have an incident and you have to call the Board of Health, the first thing they ask is how close were they within 6 feet? That's their guideline, that's their recommendation. We'll never have that at the elementary level. We never will.
And there's more opportunity to that point. I mean, like if we're going to look at the spacing, like at the high school and the middle school level, there is more opportunity to spread out by nature that they are larger buildings, I would think, but correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, are we going to be in the same boat as Mr. Hartland saying where we have 3 feet, in a classroom if we brought everybody back 5 days?
In some cases, I believe we will have.
Okay.
feet less. I believe most elementaries are 25. Our classes are going to be 28, 29 kids in a class. So our classes are naturally larger than the elementary size. So yeah, we might have some bigger rooms in some areas. I know the high school has some larger rooms than we do, but they probably have some classroom sizes that are bigger than we do. You have some class sizes that if we brought everybody back, you're going to be 31, 32 kids in there. But we're really going to have to work on unique ways to spread them out in the classrooms
Right.
where we're full as it is.
Mhm.
And I think there's 2 considerations you have to factor. From a safety standpoint, we've seen the data about wearing masks, that feels like all the precautions that were taken, I think can help keep people safe. But I think, what Mr. Rings spoke of earlier, when we do have that positive or probable case, it's just increasing the quarantine number. And then,
Right.
At what point does it tip the scales to the point where you end up with so many kids out that,
Right.
we need to go remote? It's frustrating to have a situation where a student gets quarantined, because, thankfully, you know, in the situations we've had so far, you know, there hasn't been a case from those quarantines, you know, so, you know, we're very glad nobody's getting sick. But at the same time, we have to follow those protocols because all it takes is, you know, one person to get sick and still be in the building and then, you know, then at least an outbreak. So I mean, I think there's two factors there, and we just get hit really hard by those quarantines.
Yeah.
So just to clarify too, some of these numbers that you're saying in the classrooms, is that assuming 100% students returned in class?
That's assuming that we go to 5 days a week based on the results of the surveys that we did when we were going to do it the first time.
Because
you
it,
know, we're down at least one staff member per building on average, because we're still providing online instruction. So you have to have that. Just use my building as an example. At Hilton, we have on average 4 teachers per grade level, but one of those 4 teachers is gone because they're teaching online students. So of all the rest of the students that are coming back to 5 days a week, I only have 3 options, 3 rooms to put them. Therefore, unless that online group is astronomically large compared to all the rest, it's going to make those ratios in those live in-person classrooms fairly large. And right now I have kindergarten classrooms that are going to be 25, 26 or more if we go to 5 days.
And that is also right now because we pulled some of those hires off of the list. I mean, we accounted for that. We know that those numbers were going to be higher. And so, you know, we had plans to look at, you know, getting substitute or other teachers to come in to either do the virtual or to, but, you know, then you run up against a space issue too, and classroom space. So then where do we put the virtual teachers? They don't necessarily need a room, but they need a workspace with a camera so they can still provide that instruction. So those are some of the logistical things that we still have to figure out when we bring kids back, is how do you keep those numbers that are manageable? I just want to clarify too, you know, we have said all along, when we were going to bring kids back the 5 days, that we were going to look at the American Academy of Pediatrics recommendation of 3 feet. So we never anticipated looking at 6 feet when bringing all the kids back. So I just want to make sure that we're clarifying that was always going to be our standard, bringing kids back, even with our plan on October 26th.
So it sounds like, just based on what you've said, I mean, we're going to hit challenges all the way around. We hit challenges, you know, physically, we hit challenges logistically, and I've told you we are hitting challenges educationally. So, you know, I'm going to come back to my point that educationally, I'd rather focus on what our business is and what educationally is best, and getting kids back in the building. But for 5 days, I hear what you're saying, but I think this is going to go on for a very long time. And I think our challenges are going to continue to be greater on every realm. And so I will, you know, I thank you. I know, I live it. It's difficult, and there is no right answer, but I'm going to use education as my compass and say that that's what I think is educationally best.
well, and I would just add in too that it's unfortunate we're having this meeting on a week where we've had so much crop up. And that's the thing, you know, back last summer when the county was red, the Cuyahoga County Board of Health recommended all schools in our area start remote. And we went against the grain because that was 6 weeks out from when school was starting. And then all of a sudden we dropped out of red and things got a lot better, right? And then it seemed like things were good. And then we talked about, hey, let's bring everybody back 5 days. And then we gave us 4 weeks of runway to plan for it, get ready for it. And then right when we're ready to, the week before we're ready to go, we're the red, right? And then we're bouncing all around. And so some of this, you know, we're making decisions. We're going to make a decision today about what are we doing after Thanksgiving. And we don't really know what it's going to look like after Thanksgiving. Maybe this is the high point and maybe the trend line gets better, but we don't know that. But you know, we also can't be bouncing around and having meeting every 2 weeks to see, well, gee, what's the temperature of water now? Let's go in. No, let's not. Let's stay out. And so that's why some of this, to Kathleen's point, this could be life for the next year or two. And so, you know, do we keep bouncing around? do we, just react? And so anyway, it's not an easy decision. So that, the idea of trying to get back as soon as possible to 5-day is to do the best we can with mitigation strategies, to give parents the best, always have that option to say, go online, and do the best you can with what's coming in.
Mrs. Wigman?
I will, oh, go ahead.
No,
I'm sorry.
I don't know that Ellen
Oh,
finished.
Ellen, go ahead, Brittany. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, did you want to sort of finish where you sort of landed, or?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I want the K-5 kids, and I guess I should say this. Everybody here so far has made some great points, and I'm not going to add to what people have said because I'm not in the trenches, but after weighing all these different things, I would really like the K-5 kids back in the building 5 days a week as soon as possible. And then the 6 through 12 kids, I think can operate somewhat sustainably in this hybrid model. It would be great if we could get them in the building on Wednesdays too. And then right after Christmas break, get those kids back in 5 days a week, the 6 through 12. Those are my thoughts.
Mrs. Wigman?
I think, to use Mark's phrase of decoupling ourselves from the color-coded map, I think it's an interesting opportunity because you look at our local data and you want to make decisions based on what you're experiencing in your community. So I think that that's a relevant thought. A concern I have with removing ourselves from some statewide and state-known benchmarking is the messaging that's going to go out, or how we're going to continue to communicate a threshold whenever we reach it. So often we've prompted meetings because we've changed colors, because there's been a new piece of information. So I have a fear that despite our best efforts to decouple ourselves from this, something will inevitably change and we will have an influx of communication that says, but we went this way, we went orange, we went purple, what are we going to do? And so I'm still struggling with this lack of compass and this lack of a plan, where when you look at organizations and they have missions, there's usually 3 key items that they can point to and say, these 3 things are what we do. And in our situation, it's, educating, keeping our kids healthy, keeping our kids safe, what have you. For event planning, it's, we're going to raise this much money, we're going to have this many athletes, we're going to do this many events. That's fine. And then you're able to then say, if anybody comes to you to say, does it meet these 3 criteria? Pick your number. But does it meet these 3 buckets? And the answer is no. Thank you for your input, but this is our mission. This is where we're at. And so my concern in decoupling ourselves from the color-coded system is what becomes the plan. And we talk about plans and pivoting and remaining flexible, but I have concerns about what was a little t, little p, the plan, versus what's a big T, big P plan, where somehow we're now sticking our stake in the ground to say, this is the plan. So I have significant concerns, given I feel like we all have found a rhythm. Is it the best rhythm? Absolutely not. Our kids need to be in school. Our job is to educate our kids. I have concerns about that, but separately, from a planned standpoint, to be able to say, that's what we're doing because we are decoupling, we need to be able to identify what that is. That needs to be ingrained and entrenched in our community if we are going to decouple, because if we go orange or if we go purple, somebody is going to call and say, what are we doing? And I think we need to know what that answer is.
So we need to know what the threshold is what they're saying, for us to shut a building down, or go to hybrid or,
Yeah.
what you're saying, we're not gonna use the map
Right.
as our structure.
Yeah. So in the instance, I know I've asked multiple times, and forgive me as I continue to sort of centralize on this, but absentee rates, if our original threshold was 20% absentee rate, we would close a building. Is there a different mechanism for quarantining, or we can't cover subs because we have significant numbers of teachers who, have tested positive for COVID? So I think I have significant concerns about what that threshold becomes and what that is, because again, if you can't point to something and say, this is what we're working from, it becomes a negotiating point again. And we're right back where we are, having another discussion about where we want to go, because we can't say, this is where we're going. So I need to see some clarity around decoupling from the color-coded system. I need to see what those thresholds look like. And I know that this is case by case, and I know it's building by building and quarantining versus testing positive. But I have significant concerns about that. That being said, and again, I agree. And being married to a teacher, I feel like, not in the trenches, but I have seen enough lesson planning for a while. Thank you. Our kids need to be back in school. That said, I stand that we are headed into significant family events where, unfortunately, we will be gathering. People will be gathering. And I feel like we've been able to mitigate the risk this week aside, although it needs to be considered because it's not irrelevant. We have been able to mitigate it thus far in hybrid. I think we've gotten this far because we've been in hybrid. And so my recommendation through the rest of the semester is to stay in hybrid. I worry if we move to a 5-day model, there are implications to our online kids that are not founded or not understood by those demanding to go back 5 days. And while we need to account for smaller class sizes in person, there are consequences on the back end for kids who go remote. And those who have declared being remote since the beginning of the year. Those that put their flag in the ground and said, I don't care what's happening in the classrooms, I'll be out, I should be fine and void of any impact of whatever happens in the classrooms. Well, that's not accurate, because as we've offered for families to change models and drop out and drop in online, this is specifically to the elementary level, you're impacting class sizes. And I have a hard time palating that when we ask those families in the beginning to go remote and stay remote, and then we're using them oftentimes as JV backup resources to supplement in-person learning. And you're messing with online kids, and that's not fair either. And so I would really like to see us stay in hybrid through the semester. I think it's the one time the 5 of us back in August agreed 5-0 on it. Yes, things have changed, but I think it's the best solution right now.
For the second time, I want to just clarify, I chose hybrid because I asked for 5 days and I didn't have a majority. So I've been for 5 days since August. So we may have agreed, and I know Mr. Dozen as well.
I stand
wanted
corrected.
5 days. It's okay. But we did 5 days, and we just want to see, we wanted to see our kids in the classroom. So that's,
this is beginning to wear on my son, who has selected the online. Like, our kids need to be in the classroom. I don't disagree with that on any front, but I also think it's irresponsible to disregard what we're experiencing, especially this week. And I think hybrid gives us the best chance to get our kids in front of our teachers and have consistent education without the flip-flopping.
So
And I have 2 quick questions. I'm wondering if there's a way to, for students who are in grades 6 through 12, for staying in a hybrid, if there's a way to identify students who are really struggling with that model, to get them into the buildings and in front of their teachers more frequently, and also the students who have special needs. So like you'd stay in a hybrid for the 6 through 12, but I know it's not working for all of those kids particularly well. Is there a way to say to some of those students, you can come into the building 5 days a week?
We do that now.
Okay.
We're doing that now. And so they've done a great job of identifying those kids who might need some extra support and have offered that as an option. It's 4 days, it's not the 5, so it's still remote. And then we bring in some kids, we have some medically fragile children whose, parents obviously chose them to stay online and learn. And so those kids we will bring in when there's no other kids in the building if the parent agrees for services on Wednesday so that we can protect those medically fragile kids. So that's been going on since the beginning of the year.
Okay. So just to read, do you have anything else?
Well, no, I guess I was going to say, recap, I think we could check one of the 3 off the list of board direction, which is the third question, which is, do we stay tied to the county heat map? And I heard 4 say, no, we should decouple. And I think, Brittany, are you a maybe, or I guess it doesn't really matter because there's a majority.
There's a majority. I would like to see some clarity around whatever our new normal is. And that's definitely a loaded statement.
It sounds like to me that we do have that under control. I mean, the county's kind of guiding us on what that is. Is that correct? And
Well, yeah, but I think if I understood your question correctly, what caused us to put the one elementary in remote? What caused us to put what is that magic number? And, unfortunately, it's not a magic number. We can use the percentages that we use for absenteeism. So, pre-COVID, if we had 20% absent in any building, we would shut that building down for that day, deep clean it because, that's considered spread. Is that number that high for COVID? I don't know. These are questions that the health department, where we have to say, we know what an outbreak is. Its outbreak is only 2 people, but it's got to be determined that they got it from each other within the context of the environment. And so that would be a trigger to say, okay, what do you do next? Do you shut the building down for how long of a period of time? It's going to depend on how those people got it and how many people are quarantined. If we're at the high school with 1,100 kids and, you get 2 cases and we've got to quarantine 200 of them, is that the threshold that we use? 200. That doesn't work at the elementary school. So, we can put some clarity. I can get some guidance from the health department, but I mean, to put a magic number on that, it's not. We closed down the elementary school because we didn't have staffing. There's no way we're going to get subs. And so even if it's maybe 5 staff member out, if we can't get subs, what are we going to do? We're not going to cancel school. We're going to have to switch to remote for a day. So, again, it's situational. And I think, it would do us a disservice to try to put a stake in the ground on something that is moving all the time. And our data can change. So, in the case of at our elementary school today, yeah, we had 8 staff members that were possibly exposed, but no kids. And that staff member that tested positive worked with kids. So it depends on the situation. So I can't really say to you, if it gets to X, this is what it's going to be. Absenteeism, people are absent for all different reasons. We can't assume that just because somebody's absent from school, they're absent for COVID, or they could have a cold, they could have a doctor's appointment. We can't, and there's no requirement for parents to share that with us. So, to use just straight absenteeism isn't really a fair measure to determine whether or not you're going to go remote or you're going to stay in person.
Well, and I guess I would say this topic about decoupling from the heat map, I believe that what this would mean going forward is that we're going to pick an educational model from now until till Thanksgiving, and from Thanksgiving to the end of the year, and we'll leave next semester alone because we're going to reconvene in December and the board will get a chance to have all the same kind of conversation and pick what we're going to do next year. And whatever that model is, so if it's hybrid, if it's all in, it doesn't matter. That's the model that's in place unless there's circumstances on the ground and their superintendent is empowered to say various permutations of absenteeism, quarantining, whatever, can't find teachers. You need to shut a grade down, need to shut a building down, need to shut the whole district down. You would be empowered to make that call based on what's the reality on the ground. And so it's really either we're in the educational model that the board gave direction on, or we're fully remote, right? I mean, and you make the call on when we got to switch to fully remote. And is that a building? Is that a grade? Is that a class? Is that the whole district?
That's exactly correct.
Does everybody?
Yep.
Fred?
Yep, makes sense.
So, I guess the question is.
One thing I'd like to say, just so everybody knows, one thing I'd like to say, just so everybody knows, is I too would like to see all of our kids back in school 5 days a week. And the sooner we can do that, the better I'm going to feel too. But my belief is the soonest we can do that is January 4th.
Okay. So at least on the heat map question, I think we have guidance and we've settled that, which is we are going to, and we need to update our plan that's posted, at least when we're done with everything, we'll update the plan so people know it's on the website, that we're no longer tied to the heat map. So, and I think Brittany, earlier you said, what happens if the color changes and people call? Actually, that's the easiest thing to answer, which is we're no longer tied to the heat map. So we're staying as is until something changes.
So let me say this, and Mrs. Kramer, I need some clarity on this. I heard you say that you wanted students back K through 5, and you wanted to wait till after Thanksgiving break to get that done, or?
No, as soon as
As soon
possible.
as possible.
I mean, whatever date that is. I don't,
And Mr. Dozen, I heard you say what I said, which is you wanted everybody back. However, we don't seem to have a majority on that, so I would assume then you would decide where Mrs. Kramer is, that you'd like to see K through 5 back, and then the other grades stay in hybrid. Is that correct?
Yes, I mean, I would take where we can get alignment. So, having some of our students back sooner rather than later is, if that's where, we can get 3 people to align, then, I'm fine with that.
So tell me, what is as soon as possible?
I think that would come back to Joelle about, if when we settle it, and it sounds like we're starting to go down that path of the elementaries, bring the elementary back. So that's a different scenario than bringing everybody back. And that may play into how long will it take to align the forces to get elementary back. And, and some of that, I think we'd have to defer to Joelle on when could we make that happen.
Yeah, it certainly can't happen next week. And so then the question becomes to the board. I made a recommendation, I think at the top of this conversation, that, November 30th would be a doable date, because we need at least a week to get through what we need to get through and call parents and do all of those things. I know when we talked about this with the principals yesterday, if that was the recommendation, they were comfortable with November 30th. And the reason for that is that you're going to bring kids back for 5 days, and then we're going to send them back out for 5 days. Because if you recall in our calendar, the kids are off that whole week of Thanksgiving. So they don't come back Monday and Tuesday like they have in the past. We have off that whole week because we're doing professional learning with our staff on Monday and Tuesday of that week. So, it was kind of the same situation we were at on August 22nd. Do you bring the kids back for a week just to send them back out if we would have went to purple, which was kind of the thought of why we pushed pause. So in that same context, do you bring kids back for 5 days just to send them out and again for another week, or just wait until after Thanksgiving of November 30th and being the date that we come back?
Well, and
Well, I just want to, I see every week. I see every week that those kids are in front of me every day as important. So I would say not wait till November 30th. I would say as soon as possible, which I understand a week, and I have done that, and I've seen the hard work that the administrators have to do to get that done. And a week should be something that's doable, I would think. I've seen us do it in 2 days where I work. So I would hope that a week would be enough time. We could get the kids back in front of us before Thanksgiving. I would like to see that. And then go to Thanksgiving and have a break off and then return 5 days again.
I mean, I would echo that. I mean, 1 week of 5 days, 2.5 weeks of hybrid.
I'm fine with that as well.
Okay.
I would ask for our middle school and high schoolers, I asked Mr. Martin, this question. I am asking us to consider, and I understand it's a logistical, probably, it's hard because you have to switch your progress books, from a teacher standpoint. I'm asking that if we're going to stay in hybrid at middle school and high school, we consider flipping the alphabet. I understand it seems like something small, but I can tell you from the student standpoint, if you ask them, they do see a difference. And, maybe the teachers aren't recognizing it, but we end up with holidays on a Friday. We're getting shortened days. It seems small, but again, in a hybrid world, when you're missing 3 days, it's a lot. And then how we do lessons, as you know, I'm asking us to consider please flipping the students. I don't know, if we could do that in December. We should wait to the end of the semester. We already started the quarter with progress books, so it's probably a little difficult. But if we continue in this hybrid, to please consider flipping them at the middle school and high school level. And that, we also put mental health more at the forefront as we're hitting these winter months when these kids are locked in. There's a lot of kids that are struggling at the middle school and high school level. And I know that you have seen that. And I know we're trying our best, but I don't know if we can do more groups with kids, but we really need to address their mental health at those 2 levels because they seem like they're doing okay, but we know the truth that some of them are not.
So is 6 through 12 staying hybrid through Christmas? 6 through 12.
6 through 12.
Are they staying hybrid through Christmas?
No, is
break?
it
Were you bringing back the 5th graders?
Wait, it's 5, it would be 5 through 12. wouldn't it?
Sorry,
Yeah, K4.
I apologize.
Okay. So hybrid through the holiday break?
Which holiday?
Yes.
Through Christmas
Okay.
to the end of the semester. How
Not
about,
Thanksgiving break, the holiday break.
when's the end of the semester?
And the semester isn't until January 14th.
Oh, end of the
Yeah, it's middle.
Well,
of January.
here's the thing, like, as I brought up, like, when you're grading them in the progress book, it becomes very difficult if you switch to a 5-day because those classes completely change. So just to consider, if we don't go to the end of the quarter, from a teacher standpoint, you just changed all my classes, especially at a high school level where they're all in like 6, 7 different classes. So that's a consideration. What do you, Mr. Asked? Okay. Oh, no, I was talking about switching, staying in hybrid.
Yeah, well,
How long
I
we're
guess,
gonna commit.
yeah, I guess I wasn't,
Well, I would just say, we shifted to the concurrent model to try and make this flexible as possible. So if we need to go remote, our students should be fine if we can come back 5 days.
It makes no difference. Okay. So you can go to the end of the holiday, you could use that.
end
as-
of this year.
Yeah. end
So
of
what
this
we're
year,
saying is
and
we're
it's not
setting the
hybrid.
direction for the end of this year. And the
Calendar
board-
year.
Calendar year.
Yes.
Yes.
And the board will reconvene sometime in probably late December, mid to late December, to figure out what are we doing after the holidays.
There.
So,
Yeah, I mean, I guess unless things drastically change, I'm all for everybody going 5 days a week, starting January 4th.
yeah, I mean, I'll be in the same place, but we can have that discussion in January. We'll see, I mean, not in January, in December. We'll see what the world looks like. So I think what we've settled on is decoupling from the heat map, and that elementary, which is K through 4, will return the week of Monday, the 16th. Is that correct? And they will be back for 1 week, and then the next week is Thanksgiving. So they'll be off, and then they'll return after that in person. And 5 through 12 will remain in hybrid until the end of this calendar year.
There's no way to include the 5th graders in that K through 5 scenario? I mean,
They're at the middle
They're in a
school.
different building.
right, I know, but just because they're at a different building, does that mean?
Well,
I don't
it's
know.
gonna, bus routing, there's a lot of different things that would have to be
Yeah.
considered
Yeah,
if we were gonna bring them back 5 days and
No, you can't do it.
Again, coming back to everybody back 5 days would be
well,
great. but
again, I think
that's
we're all on the
not where
same
we're-
page.
That's not where we're at. So we have to pick a point, and that seems to be logistically the point we need to pick, right, is 4th grade, because they're at
Right.
the buildings.
Yep.
Sounds like trying to get the 5th grade because they're in a different building would be pretty difficult logistically to do that.
Okay. Okay, if you can think of any way to include them, please do. I just feel like that age group is, because I know they only switch classes once a day, right?
Let us work on it.
Okay.
It's certainly not something that we can't talk about and see if we can problem solve through. I mean, just to make that happen the week of November 16th and how that might impact transportation, that's not going to happen. But
Okay.
certainly if we can look at it and if we can try to figure it out, we can consider it for when we come back after Thanksgiving. But we'll definitely look at it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. All right, so I want to thank everybody. I want to thank our administrators. I want to thank our teachers. I know that you are doing an amazing job. I want to thank our parents for, this is difficult. I want to thank our superintendent and our treasurer and, fellow board members, because I know that everybody says they don't want to be in any of our shoes, and they're right, they don't. But I want to tell you that we are weathering this storm and we are doing an amazing job, and we're keeping up our heritage, and we're doing the best we can in a circumstance that nobody can really do that great. So thank you, everybody. And, let's keep sticking with it so we can get our kids educated.
Which, Kathleen, we should probably also, I really want to thank our custodial staff,
Amazing.
because this has been, I'm sure, really hard on them.
May I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
We have a regular board meeting, November 18th, 2020, where there will be a speaking of the public. Item 5, closing items, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second,
Okay, roll call.
Mr. Dosen?
Yes.
Mrs. Kramer?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
yes.
Mrs. Wigman?
Yes.
Mrs. Mack?
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.